Miigwech, Amy. Thank you for having me here. First, I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on the traditional and unceded lands of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin people. I want to extend my gratitude to Carol and Rebecca and the team at FCM. Aren't they doing a great job? I think we give them a huge round of applause. They're just incredible. I'm just so grateful to be with you today, leaders who are on the front lines of serving our communities, and it'd be remiss for me to not talk about people that are here from my riding, from the city of Courtney-Alberni, the city of Parksville, the city of Courtney, the district of Tofino, and the town of Qualicum Beach. Thank you for coming all the way from Vancouver Island. Yeah, I know it's the most beautiful place, so I always have to talk about it. No, you really live in beautiful places because we live in the most beautiful country in the world. But you have such an important role, and I know that as a former municipal councillor, the responsibility that's put on you to be looking out for your citizens and your communities. I want to thank you for your service, for stepping up for your community, and also the people that aren't here in the room today. The people that are working, the workers, the people, the planners, obviously those that are in public works, arts and culture and recreation, that are serving our communities out there, fixing our roads. They're critical to keeping our communities vibrant. To labor, to the QP workers, thank you so much. We owe them all a ton of gratitude. So before, I was a member of parliament, as you heard, I was a municipal councillor in the district of Tofino, so I got a glimpse of what you're going through, fighting to keep, make sure that you're working with the limited dollars, making sure they go further and farther, navigating provincial and federal red tape, and pushing to get critical projects off the ground. I also saw the challenges that rural communities face. The pressures that come with underfunded infrastructure, housing shortages, and climate emergencies that hit small towns just as hard, if not harder, than major cities, which we're seeing playing out right now in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, and in British Columbia. And I think we can all join together in sending our prayers and thoughts to the people that have been evacuated, how hard that is on their communities, and the first responders. And we all extend our thoughts, our prayers to each and every one of them. Today, I'm going to speak really plainly here because the stakes are high and the moment is urgent. We're all here because we know that national prosperity begins at the local level. And as the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has made clear through your Stronger Together campaign, the future of our country depends on working in true partnership with local governments. We need a national prosperity partnership that brings all orders of government to the table with stable, predictable, long-term funding so we can build thriving, resilient communities together. You keep being told what to do and asked to do with less. We must make it stop. That's why you're here. You can count on the federal NDP to support you in the fight to spark local economic growth. In this time of crisis where we need to create a more resilient economy, and we must empower municipalities to lead the way by modernizing the fiscal framework, cutting interprovincial trade barriers, and making sure local governments have the tools and funding they need to spark innovation and create good jobs in every corner of the country. Now, we heard the Prime Minister talk about infrastructure. He says, the Prime Minister keeps saying, build, baby, build. And he's right, that we have to build. But there is no faster way to build than providing resources directly to municipalities so they can build the infrastructure you need. Now, there's a $240 billion infrastructure gap in Canada. I don't need to tell you about that. You know all too well. It's not just a number, it's crumbling roads, aging water systems, deferred projects that slow down housing, harm our environment, and put our safety at risk. And you have to continue to put your hand out and beg for help. It's not just a number, like I said. Municipalities own more than 60% of Canada's core public infrastructure, yet you only collect between 8 and 10 cents of every dollar. Now, if the federal government wants to build, they could immediately double the Canada Community Building Fund. This would allow you to move quickly on important infrastructure for your communities that need this critical investment instead of going through provincial or federal bureaucracy. It's important to note that without increasing federal infrastructure spending, the government can't meet its housing targets or the needs of Canadians. If municipalities don't have the funds to build needed water, sewer, and transportation infrastructure, new housing projects, they're all going to be stalled. You know that. I know that. And I'm sure many of your communities have housing projects that are on hold due to infrastructure capacity constraints. You need a federal partner to address these gaps in your communities, so we can unleash wartime-like effort to build the housing Canadians need. We also need to make sure we're building livable communities with more funding for pools, arenas, arts and culture, and facilities for youth. This will bring people together and save money in the long run by investing in the physical, mental well-being of Canadians. The last major round of federal funding for recreation infrastructure was in 1967, over 50 years ago. If we want to boost local prosperity, we also need to obviously improve digital connectivity. Don't I know that? And don't you know that if you live in rural Canada? You know, we need fast, reliable internet and cellular service. It shouldn't be a luxury anymore. It's absolutely essential. Strong digital infrastructure keeps communities connected, strengthens local economies, enhances public safety, and opens up new opportunities across the country. Now, obviously, housing is a huge crisis, and I'm going to touch on housing because it's pushing people to the brink in every single community I visit, in every single community in the 34 communities in my riding, in your communities. We need bold investments in affordable, non-market, and co-op housing. We need to treat housing as what it is, a human right, not a commodity for investors to profit while families sleep in shelters or live in tents. As FCM has warned, if we stay on the current path, and thank you for your work again, nearly 500,000 Canadians will be experiencing homelessness by 2030. That's in 5 years. That's not totally unacceptable. It's unacceptable to everyone in this room. We need a plan, and that plan needs to be backed by funding to prevent this human disaster before it gets worse. We need to accelerate and increase the money for reaching home. You know, the previous Prime Minister promised to ensure that unhoused people half of them would be housed in 10 years. That's not good enough. That is not good enough. Is that acceptable to you? Of course not. Fortunately, what we're hearing right now are the same market-driven solutions that have shown to not be enough. You know, I think back, I grew up in co-op housing in the 1980s. I'm a recipient of the opportunity my parents were afforded to live in geared-to-income housing, co-op housing. So I'm a product of that. And in the 70s and 80s, we built 25,000 units a year. We had non-market housing in this country, and in 1992, Jean Chrétien pulled us out of it. Right now, we're at 3.4%. Denmark is at 21%. The Netherlands, 34%. France, Britain, 17%. Well, I don't need to tell you what 3.4% looks like. You can walk out the doors and take a look. You can look around your community, every single major city, at what 3.4% non-market housing looks like. You know, the speech from the throne made no mention of co-op housing, non-market housing, or going after corporate greed or helping protect renters. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt we need the private sector. As the Conservatives and Liberals want to single-handedly use the private sector to solve an affordable housing crisis, there is nowhere in the world that the private sector has completely solved an affordable housing crisis alone. Nowhere. It's why the government must better support and increase the stock of non-market housing in this country. And we as New Democrats, we're going to fight tooth and nail to ensure that we double the number of non-profit homes in Canada in the next 4 years. We're going to do everything we can. And almost every community has a project that is shovel-ready that could get started right away if the federal government stepped forward like they did in the 1970s and 1980s. We'll also fight to ensure that Prime Minister Carney's attempts to bring down development charges don't come at your community's expense. Both the Liberals and Conservatives, you know, they've talked about cutting development charges in half, but we need a clear commitment that they won't leave a hole in municipal budgets, and it's not on your backs. It can't be. We need an honest conversation also about the other crisis that's unfolding in our streets and homes, the toxic drug crisis and the mental health crisis. And I'll start with the toxic drug crisis. It's personal for me. My riding's been hit hard, like many of yours. Lives are being lost every single day, from big cities to small towns. It's not just a health crisis, it's a housing crisis, a mental health crisis, a poverty crisis. And it's one we must face together, without stigma, without delay, and without passing the buck. Local governments are doing incredible work with scarce resources, but you can't do it alone. And you need a federal government that shows up with funding for mental health, addiction and substance use services, and with housing that gives people the chance to recover and rebuild their lives. We need to treat this as an emergency that it is, and we need to act now. It's time to declare a public health emergency and begin mobilizing an emergency response. We need a comprehensive, integrated, coordinated plan that is adequately funded, backed with a timeline to help people who are struggling with substance use and ensure all Canadians feel safe in their communities. And we'll continue to urge the government to convene a national summit on the toxic drug crisis to bring together provincial, territorial, and municipal leaders, health experts, law enforcement, and people with lived experience to help chart a path forward. And I find it illuminating that we've had a national summit on auto theft. I'm not saying that that's not important, but not on the toxic drug crisis, which has taken more than 50,000 lives. That's stigma in action. And we'll continue to push past the stigma and to make the toxic drug crisis and mental health federal priorities. In fact, this week I was honored to table the first private member bill of this new parliament. On Thursday, I introduced Bill C-201, the Mental Health Parity Act, which aims to include community-based mental health, addictions, and substance use services in Canada's universal public healthcare system. I previously introduced this bill, and I believe we need to urgently break down the financial barriers to mental health services. Untreated mental health has enormous costs for families, communities in our economy, and you know it. And as it stands, provincial and territorial health plans are only required to cover mental health, addictions, and substance use health services when provided by physicians or in hospitals and deemed medically necessary. As a result, many services like counseling aren't covered under public health plans. The lack of public coverage forces Canadians who are struggling to shoulder significant out-of-pocket costs or go without supports they need. We're facing this mental health crisis, and it's clear that the status quo isn't working. Finally, I want to speak about something many of you know better than most, the growing impacts of the climate crisis. You're the ones responding to floods, wildfires, to heat domes. You're the ones leading on adaptation and resilience, and yet far too often the funding and decision-making power are out of reach. We need to fix that. I believe we need to invest directly in communities to protect homes, build green infrastructure, a national electrification grid, and cut emissions, not just to meet climate targets, but to save lives and livelihoods. We can't forget our rural and northern remote communities. These regions hold so much potential, from clean energy like biomass to sustainable agriculture to Indigenous-led development. And they're being left behind by inadequate funding or programs that are designed for big cities. And I always say this, wealth starts in rural communities, but it leaves rural communities. That needs to be fixed. We need targeted investments to ensure those communities, our communities, don't just survive, that they thrive. And as a first step the Prime Minister could take this spring is to boost the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund and make it more accessible for rural and smaller communities. In conclusion, reconciliation starts at the local level, and you need resources to support the work you're doing. You understand free, prior, and informed consent better than anyone, and the important work being done there. Thank you for that work. The theme of your annual conference, Stronger Together, hit me hard. To me, that's not just a slogan, it's the only path forward. It represents what I believe in the values of the party I represent. We'll always stand together, and I see I'm running close on time here. But I read a story today that the Prime Minister said yesterday. Ottawa probably can't help overhaul how municipalities raise funds in the near future because the federal government is now focused on major nation-building projects. Well, investing in local governments is nation building. Creating livable communities is nation building. In fact, we can't achieve as a country our economic growth goals or priorities without you. We can't achieve the dreams and potential as a nation without you. And in these challenging times, I really hope that the current government will be able to see the long-term benefits of finally providing the resources municipalities need instead of designing programs just to earn political capital. And again, as a former municipal councillor, I know what it feels like to fight for your community and not be heard. And I can assure you that our small but mighty NDP team hears you. We're an ally. We're committed to fighting alongside you for infrastructure that works, housing that people can actually afford, safe streets, and real progress in the crises we face together. Let's keep pushing with urgency, with compassion, and with unity. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech. Have a fabulous conference. Thank you for your service to your communities. Thank you.